Imagine having one identity online that you can use to log into all of the software as a service applications that you use for your business. Is it too good to be true? Is it magic? Is it voodoo? No, it's called single sign-on. So let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Chris Burns from Techie Gurus, and welcome back. So this month's all about identity. Last week we covered passwordless login. Today I'm going to talk about single sign-on. So what makes single sign-on so great? Well, it's a way that you can actually use one identity to log into multiple websites. You've probably seen this from a personal standpoint where you can use like your Facebook login, your Google login, or your Microsoft login to authenticate to websites. That's a way of doing single sign-on to where you can kind of maintain that. It'll create the account. But I want to take this to the business level. And in the business world, we could log into things like Zoom or Adobe, all from one identity, all without having to have separate passwords for that account. Now, there are some risks to this. There are some gotchas. There's also some pros. So let's dive into what exactly is single sign-on. So a single sign-on, the idea is to really just simplify the authentication process. Now, it's pretty advanced. I don't want to go through all of the steps of how the actual login happens, but for the most part, what you have to understand is there's going to be a provider for the software that you're using, and there's going to be an identity provider. Now, you're going to use the identity provider, and they're going to have a trust with the software provider, and they're going to exchange a token. So you're going to log into your identity provider, and they're going to give the token to the application provider, and they're just going to log you in. So an example would be, let's say I want to use Okta, or I want to use Microsoft Azure AD to do a single sign-on into an application that I'm going to use. Let's say it's Zoom or Adobe or whatever application. Now, they have a relationship that we can set this up. So there's usually instructions that you can do that. You set it up, you go to Zoom or you go to Adobe, you go to log in, you're going to say, you can put in probably your email address. It's going to redirect you to the proper login for Microsoft. You're going to authenticate to Microsoft, and boom, it's going to pass your authentication through. That's this oversimplified way of it working. Now, what does this mean for your end users? Well, for your end users, it means, hey, I don't have to have a ton of different passwords for things like Adobe, Zoom, whatever applications you want to use. I can have one login. I can protect that login, and I can go to work. So it's a way of simplifying the way that people have to work and the way that people access their systems. But what are some of the risks that are involved with using a single sign-on solution? One of the main risks that we see when you're going to do single sign-on is companies don't have strict password requirements, strict multi-factor authentication requirements, and that presents probably the biggest risk to the business. There is some inherent risk with using Azure AD as your SSO provider as well, but for the most part, the main risk is going to be you have to protect that one account, that one identity at all costs. Because if that account gets hacked, they have access to everything that you have access to. All your software service applications, all your applications are using SSO, all of it. So that account becomes the de facto account for every user that you have to protect. So you have to do things that make it a strong password, strong authentication. If it's passwordless, you're going to use something like biometrics or whatever to protect that login. So that's the main risk that you have to kind of go through. Now, if you want to talk about some other downsides of single sign-on, it can be expensive. Microsoft gives you single sign-on or SSO inside of Azure AD for certain licenses, and it allows an administrator to go through and set that up if the software that you're using supports Microsoft as the identity provider, which most do, because Microsoft uses standards in the industry. However, Microsoft does have an issue where there is a way to bypass their SSO. It's kind of it's well documented in the cybersecurity community, so I'm not recommending that as an option. You can certainly use it, but it's not me recommending it to you. You still have to understand the risks that are presented out there and whether you're going to make that decision. So let's kind of talk about some of the advantages of single sign-on. Quite frankly, it's just easier to provision a user. If you have SSO turned on and you have, let's say, 5 software as a service applications, you can provision one account and you can provision access to all of those other accounts through that one account. Your users can access applications much quicker, right? They don't need to create separate logins for everything. You can have one login you can log in. You're not going to have to spend a bunch of time with lost passwords because guess what? People have one password to protect. And administrators can put central control over the user access to platforms. So another thing that you think about is when somebody quits or somebody's fired, you disable their login, it disables all of the logins to all of the other applications when you're using single sign-on. That's a huge advantage because one of the things that we see is people don't know what applications people have access to. So if you know that and you have single sign-on turned on, you disable their account, boom, access is killed immediately. So those are some of the advantages of single sign-on. What does it mean for you and your business? So as far as your business, the one thing I want you to understand is when you do use single sign-on, it is kind of a risk from a standpoint of if that identity provider goes down, you can't log into your applications. So we want to take that into consideration, but the advantages of it probably outweigh that risk. But that's something you have to make a decision in your business. So let's kind of talk about like what businesses can actually implement this. So if you're a larger business, if you're a medium-sized business, you shouldn't have a problem implementing this. It really comes down to the software and what's supported. I mentioned a couple, Zoom, Adobe. There's other ones out there. There's hundreds in the Microsoft compatibility for that. There's hundreds, if not thousands, in Okta, things like that. Again, the capability exists. The problem is with small businesses, you may not be able to do certain sites because they might have a paywall situation. And by that, I mean they might require you to have 10 licenses or more or some other arbitrary number before you can actually use SSO, which I hate. It's stupid to put it behind a paywall because it really doesn't cost them anything. They've already got the infrastructure. It's more of just an annoyance for the end users. So I want that to change. That's something that needs to change. We need to do better when you do software and you put software as a service out there. Make SSO a possibility right from the get-go. So I hope this video was informative to you. It's a shorter video this week. Passwordless was a little bit more to that. But one thing you can do is you can combine Passwordless with SSO. So if you go passwordless with like Microsoft or some other provider, and that's your identity provider, there's a good chance that they support SSO into other software as a service applications and websites. So you can have a situation where you don't even need a password. Your users don't even have a password. They go up, they authenticate themselves for whatever identity provider it is. It just logs them in. And again, a huge benefit is the ability to disable or delete that account, and it disables access to the application. Actually, all applications. So this was definitely a shorter video than last week, and I just want to kind of tie this all up and say, hey, you can use passwordless authentication with SSO. It's common. You can also use it with MFA that we talked about. That's common as well. Actually, wrapping them all up into one is an awesome solution. Again, there are risks to it. You have to kind of weigh those risks in your business and make that decision for yourself. But it's not out of the realm of possibility for most businesses to actually implement this and make it easier on your business. It makes it a better experience for the end users, and it makes you safer at the end of the day, even when you consider the other risks that are involved. So hope this was informative. If you have any questions, comment down below, DM us, ask away. We'll be as active as we can and answer those questions. If you have any other topic that you'd like us to cover, again, I asked this last week, let us know. Like we're doing identity this month, but maybe next month we can choose what you recommend, and we'll give you a shout out as well. So until next time, stay cyber safe.